Oh, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us on World Mental Health Day. Obviously a very important day in the calendar. Grateful to all of you for joining us. Gary, obviously manager of Mill, if you wouldn't mind starting with us. Obviously going back to the beginning of lockdown, which seems such a long time ago, how big a challenge was that as manager of a football club? What is obviously normally a very sociable, energetic environment, overnight that changed completely. Could you just give us a little bit of insight into how it was and how difficult a challenge it was for you to kind of work in a different way?
Yeah, it was a really different challenge, just simply because you go from being face-to-face contact with all the players, and if there's an issue or anything, you can constantly have those meetings and that sort of that level of personal conversation, and all of a sudden, everyone's sat at home not necessarily on their own, but everyone's sat at home, and I suppose what we did to start with, we tried to do it from a personal level. So I rang around every player within the first week and just said, "How are you finding it? How are you feeling? How are you finding it? How are your family?" Because it kind of transcended away from football completely, and it just became a real concern just for them as individuals and how they were finding the different scenario, like I suppose everybody out there. So that was the biggest challenge, I think, and it's just making sure that everyone was okay, their extended families were all right and weren't initially affected by it. And then I think one of the challenges we found was, how can we maintain that level, or how can we actually improve the cohesion as a group, even away from the training ground, and however long that might be. So we tried to think of lots of different ways to engage. So we put training sessions where we put videos out there for the players to have a go. We asked the players to put some training sessions on themselves and show the rest of the group. So I think we just tried to keep them engaged and keep them chatting and keep them that sociable side, but that we just took for granted day to day.
How important do you think that was for the mental health of the players? Because I'm conscious that some were with their families, so they had that day-to-day engagement. Some were sort of in flats on their own. So in terms of, you mentioned the video meetings and video training sessions, how conscious were you of the potential impact of that in your players' mental health?
Yeah, I think the first thing is obviously that, the majority of players are in a very fortunate position where, the impact for them is not necessarily a financial one in terms of their job. So they haven't got that side of it to worry about too much. But you had a real difference in what was really interesting was just a chance to engage with the players on an individual level and probably learn more about them in lockdown than we would do normally, which in some ways I was a little bit not embarrassed about, but I think it just shows, you need to spend more time with people to understand their own situation. So we had a real different one. So we had some players had young children, and it was quite interesting that some of them said, I'd love to, I'm a bit tongue in cheek, but I'd love to be bored playing on my PS4. I'd love to be bored, with nothing to do, because they've got young kids and certainly their time's occupied by looking after them, particularly as they probably can't go out and do the normal things that they would do to spend a little bit of the day. Then we had some single lads. I remember Matt Smith was in his house on his own, and he said, "I'm finding it incredibly difficult." He said, "I'm a really sociable person. I'm out all the time, meeting my friends for coffee and all those little moments." And I think he found it a real challenge, So again, really, I suppose it was just making sure the players knew that we were there for them, that we care about them away from football. It's not just an industry. It's not just about winning games. It was about trying to sort of engage with them on a personal level and make sure that first and foremost, that they were okay. Because again, it was a massively challenging period for anyone, regardless of your whether you're a famous sports person or a person on your own or person with a different type of job. It didn't, I think it challenged people in different ways, didn't it? So and it was unprecedented. I don't think anyone. I think it's something is what our players found one of the biggest challenges. There was no real end to it. If you tell someone they've got 5 weeks out of work, or you're 6 weeks out of work or something, at least you can kind of define that by the period and maybe make some sort of plans towards how you spend that time and keep yourself busy and active. But I think certainly for some of the players, it was almost the season could start in a week, it could start in 4 months, it could start in a year. I think a lot of them actually found that a real challenge because there was nothing really to work towards, you know, in terms of their sort of physical training.
Do you think the perhaps increased consciousness towards mental health in society in recent years has affected the way that you manage, certainly on a sort of person-to-person basis?
Yeah, I think it's a massive thing. I think it's something I'm aware of. I mean, I've got 4 children myself, so I mean, there's so many different. I think it's such a different world that we live in right at this moment, with so many different things that can affect your sort of well-being. I think on a day-to-day level, and that perhaps, you know, someone like myself didn't have to deal with when I was younger. I think it's always something that's a real challenge. You know, I think it's something that I've been aware of for a while, and something that, you know, I spent 9 months out of work, or something I personally had to actively think about, and how I could, you know, keep myself focused and keep myself mentally stimulated, so that I didn't feel my day just became another day, you know, and almost just let the day pass doing nothing and feeling quite negative about it. So yeah, it's something that you know, I'm quite actively keen to understand other people's perspectives. I think that's the key.
And just coming over to you, Jubin, I know, speaking to Sean, you know, you and some others have worked incredibly hard. You was planning on I think it's taken 200 youngsters away in the summer for quite a big event. Obviously, unfortunately, everything was shut down as a result of the lockdown. Unfortunately, you was furloughed as part of that. Just how difficult has the past few months been for you, and how have you sort of dealt with that mentally?
Yeah, it was quite difficult. I was pointing to my post about this time last year, so playing catch up anyway with regards to my role in terms of trying to hit my targets, hit my numbers, get the amount of kids away that we needed to away. And we done a lot of hard work for it, was on the right track, and then bang, all of a sudden, I think it was around about the 18th of March, told by essentially our funder, which is government funded, that we need to stop contacting kids and stop promoting the program that we've worked so hard to actually promote, and we'll just waiting for an update essentially. You know, a couple of weeks went past, a month went past, 2 months went past, and then we were told, oh, it's not happening. I was put on furlough for the duration of time. I thought furlough was going to be all right. I was like, oh yeah, you know, holiday. And then when you start realising actually you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, and then it started to get a little bit tough. And, you know, I like coming into work. I like having a structure throughout the day. So not being able to have work and come to have a regular activity to do in terms of work and just meet, you know, it's quite a social environment. We work in the office, and we all get along quite well. So to have that taken away from you was quite difficult. So I had to find other avenues to keep myself occupied. Started painting, which was quite interesting. I can't really paint, so I bought one of them paint my numbers little kits. Took a couple of weeks to arrive, and it was 2 unicorns. Painting 2 unicorns every 3 months. But with regards to the program, yeah, it was disappointing to see us trying to hit our numbers and then it fall down. And then towards the back end of the summer, we were all of a sudden told, oh yeah, actually, you can go ahead. So our figure of 250 dropped down to around about 20 kids, because just the lack of communication that we had with the students and the lack of clarity we had with regards to the go ahead of the program. But it was lovely having the small cohort of students we did, because we actually did a mental health and a mental well-being session with them when they came with us at Millwall, just to see how lockdown and how COVID had impacted them and how it affected them. And we found out that a lot of the young people we work with are 16 and 17-year-olds, so year 11s and year 12, and they've not been in school for the past 4 or 5 months. They've not had access to any kind of youth services or anything like that. So they were pretty much in a similar position to me being furloughed. They were essentially furloughed from school, and their regular contact with their friends was cut off. So it was nice to create an environment, a safe environment for them to come down to meet each meet new people whilst also having some structure to their days as well. So even though we didn't get to take our 250 away and was only 10% of that, it was nice to sort of get into some normality.
And Tony, I know your sort of health issues in recent years are relatively well documented. Those who are familiar with you will know about them, unfortunately. You've been a participant on the Trust Walking Football programme for quite some time. Obviously, that's had to come to an end as a result of COVID. Obviously, hopefully we can relaunch that at some stage in the future. But how's that been for you? Because that every week, that was such a key part of your calendar, wasn't it? I guess you spent a lot of time sort of self-isolating and shielding, and ultimately you've missed out on seeing some very important people in your life in recent months.
Yes, the group at Millwall is very mutually supportive. The people who don't know, I've got blood cancer, and I have had for the last 4 years. And I found the social support of the Walking Football group immensely important. When I was first diagnosed, for instance, the rest of the group got together and bought me a Millwall away shirt, and then our coach, Dean Palmer, arranged to have it all signed by the Millwall team, and just like that were immensely important to me. And I missed. In fact, we have started playing again. The last couple of weeks at St Paul's, the group is playing on a Thursday normally, but as of tomorrow, it's on, or next week rather, it's on a Friday. And I organised immediately, the government eased the restrictions. I organised kickabouts for the group originally in Burgess Park, but then latterly in a five-a-side pitch, which is near the Borough Station. So about 10 or a dozen of us have been getting together the last couple of weeks to do that. During the shielding period, obviously I was one of the lucky people to get a letter from the government saying you've got to stay indoors for 12 weeks. Indeed, the only times I left the house during that period was 4 times when I had to go to Guy's to get treated. So that was very jolly. And I thought, let's try and keep some social contact going with the group. So I organised through this system a Zoom session every week with the footballers. And again, about a dozen people typically came on for that. And lastly, last year I was part of a Sport England campaign called We Are Undefeatable. And it was dramatising the fact that people with serious disease, of whom I was one, can still lead an active life. And obviously we featured the fact that I played football at Millwall. But they decided to do something during the lockdown period, and they established a walking football virtual team under the England walking football manager, Stuart Langton. And we've been meeting online once a week. So I am officially, because this is the England virtual walking football team, I am an England football player, I'll have you know. So, and I've got a shirt to prove it. So that's how I've managed, with difficulty, but managed to see it through.
And Glenn, at the other end of the scale, obviously your education pretty much had to come to a stop in terms of in person. Everything moved online, didn't it? As far as I understand it, you couldn't do exams or coursework, so you had to go off predicted grades. How difficult was that to deal with, not just in terms of knowing that, but also having to essentially educate yourself alone compared to in the, a classroom environment with your with your peers?
Yeah, no, it wasn't easy. I was used to going in every day, seeing my friends, having normal banter as you do every day, and then all of a sudden to just stop and having to go online, it was a massive change. And as you were saying, a lot of it, I thrive one-to-one with a teacher. I feel like I work better with a teacher, but just like when there's 30 people on a call and everyone's talking at once, it's hard. And I felt like I maybe could have got better results than a pass in my results. Felt like I could have gone for a merit if maybe I was in class and getting the support that I needed. But to be fair, that everyone were under the same circumstances, so it wasn't easy.
How challenging was that though, mentally, knowing that kind of the element of control you had in terms of your work and what you could put into it was in a way going to be taken away from you, and someone else is going to be in charge of your success or failure, as it were? Yeah,
that's another thing. It was sort of it felt pointless in a way. You're working so hard for someone to maybe grade you down. You can't do nothing about it. It's going to be sent off, and you can't argue it. You can't improve on it because you're not there your teacher can't look over it whilst you're there, and you might not understand it over the phone. So it was really challenging.
And Katie, obviously, as well as being manager of the Lionesses, you also overseeing things from a safeguarding point of view. At the Trust, safeguarding is one sort of operational area that's been obviously massively impacted by COVID in the past 6 or 7 months. How have you found things, and what sort of challenges have you faced, not just in terms of your own job, but in terms of dealing with other people who have been impacted by COVID?
Yeah, I think initially, obviously, when they first announced the lockdown, you're, as much as you're safeguarding children within, the academy environment and the community trust environment, you're also now, you've got adults at risk, and you're also now having to think about mental health and how that's affecting each individual, whether it be a participant within education or a participant within a programme within the adult environment. And, what can we put in place as a club that is a family focused club? What support can we put in place, or what support can we offer? And it's quite difficult. We run so many programmes within the community trust, and also as well as the academy, and so it was quite hard in that sense to now think, what more can we do? It's not straightforward. I'm now COVID officer as well for the community trust and the boys academy. So not only am I now having to think about obviously the safeguarding elements that are within my role, but also how COVID-19 does have an effect as we're trying to obviously come back and get some kind of normality back in people's lives. Because I think that ultimately was what our aim was, to when we were allowed to do it and the government guideline changed, to allow us to kind of help and support individuals in getting that kind of normality, even though it wasn't ever going to go back to full normality. What support can we put in place to allow that to happen? And I think at the moment we are doing it successfully, and yes, it's challenging and no one knows the answers, but it just shows again how big the community is, in the sense that we're all trying to help and support moving forward. So it was challenging to start off with, but now we're getting back, and I think we're heading in the right direction.
Lauren, I understand you work in a school, so you'll be extremely familiar with many of the challenges faced by the kind of education sector. Just how big of an impact did it have in terms of your day-to-day life and your day-to-day role, and how concerned were you with the impact that the lockdown would have perhaps on the social development of some of your students?
Yeah, I guess the impact that it had on the social element with the students, that is, so we are, for those who don't know, we are a school for social, emotional, mental health. So dealing with mental health is something that we do on a daily basis. There was lots of calls home, daily calls home with parents. Obviously, yourselves, Millwall, were really supportive at the time. We had a few boys with you. and you were really supportive, checking in with them. As I say, we deal with mental health with our students on a daily basis. Going into lockdown, I think Gary said earlier, you know, not knowing when they were going to come back was the most difficult thing for them, because they like to know what they're doing and when they're doing it. So not knowing when they were coming back was really, really difficult for the families. Some families, it benefited some families. It really brought some families together where the students were at home and they were cooking together, they were doing all sorts of things together. But for other families, it was incredibly difficult. Safeguarding concerns increased for some of the students who we wouldn't have known, obviously, unless we were doing those welfare calls. And some of the safeguarding concerns were, they were all a priority, but some of them were really challenging. They were really, really challenging. And then we opened up as a hub. We had quite a few vulnerable students in. The students who attended the hub, they actually got on really well with it. It was a high adult student ratio, so they was able to get a lot of attention from the adults. But yeah, it was just as difficult in the school setting as you're all saying. I feel like we were definitely all in this together, and although we all have separate experiences of it, I think generally the feeling and the emotion and the mental health behind it is all the same for all of us. But yeah, I mean, the kids have come back in September. They've got on with things. We've had to have really high expectations of what they can do, what they can't do. Some of our students, they really struggle with the word no, generally anyway. So throwing COVID into it as well, that was really difficult to begin with. But they seem to have adapted. I think with so much time at home and dealing with COVID outside of school, by the time they did come back in September, the majority were prepared for changes, which can be really difficult for our students. Change is really difficult for them. But yeah, they're managing so far.
Kelly, I know you've been extremely busy in the past few months. You're a post person, so you're a key worker. How conscious were you of the fact that for so many people on your rounds, you might have been the only person that they were seeing day to day for whatever reason, general lockdown or the need to self-isolate and shield. So how did that affect the way that you went about your job and your sort of consciousness of their mental health?
For me, like as I say, lockdown was just unbelievable. I can't even put it into words, because to be out there and, as you said, be the only person that they might see through that day, to try and even have that little bit of interaction with someone, it meant a lot. It felt like you was actually doing something. Felt like you was helping that person throughout that day. As I say, it was a really eerie place to be in London with no cars on the streets, it felt like. I mean, I've never seen nothing like it. And then obviously when they brought in the COVID tests for us, I think we all felt like we was doing something even more, to know that we was a part of getting people their tests done, getting them through the system and then getting their results, and people like feeling a lot safer, knowing whether they were negative or positive, whichever way it was, that they could get the help that they needed. But for me, yeah, I've never seen nothing like it. But to be a little bit of someone's help that day, it meant the world to be there and support people as much as I could.
And Tom, I know you work in a very different industry to what's been mentioned so far. So can you just talk us through the past 6 or 7 months for you and what it's been like?
Yeah, so I'm an actor and playwright predominantly, and obviously we all know theatre is currently not really happening, which I think is been really difficult. I think if you look historically, the role of the arts in times like critical periods in history has been to kind of entertain and uplift the nation in some way, shape or form. So I think initially, apart from kind of, you know, trying to find a structure to your day and kind of all of that freelance income is just immediately gone and trying to figure out when the next paycheck is, it was still about what can you try and create, albeit limited, online. So there was a group of writers got together and set up a YouTube theatre, essentially, and we all wrote basically plays which could be performed virtually, and then we got various other creatives involved and kind of still tried to treat it as a business. So then any donations which were made from people watching it, you know, creatives got a little bit of money from that. So I think that was quite nice at first to kind of try and fulfill that role in a very limited way, which we, you know, can at the moment. I think there's still a lot of questions around people's careers in the arts and kind of what that will look like in the future. Very fortunately, I'm working towards a project for next year, but again, I don't actually know if that will go on or if it will happen. And yeah, I think people will really, you know, the longer this goes on, the more entire careers are going to have to be brought into question, and people might have to retrain something they've trained really hard all of their life for to then completely rethink something. So yeah, I think it's still an ongoing process for us, and obviously mentally that takes its toll. But I would say one thing that people in the arts are good at is talking. So I guess yeah, it's something that is an ongoing discussion. We're good at talking with one another, and I think that's generally important for everyone at the moment.
And Trevor, could you talk us through the work that you sort of oversee at the Trust, and specifically the SLAM programme?
Yeah, I've been running the SLAM mental health football group for about 12, 13 years now. I was a service user myself at first. I got into it by volunteering. So we're now in partnership with Millwall Community Trust, and we have been for a very long time. We run football sessions on a Friday at Rotherhithe. And I've also, I'm employed by South London and Maudsley NHS Trust as a support worker as well. So I kind of mix the two roles in between getting people out and about and also being a football coach as well. And that works really, really well. How
has sort of the past few months and what's happened with lockdown and COVID affected your day-to-day work with the participants on the programme?
Yeah, it's obviously, you know, we didn't have the group running for about 6 months. I think we only started last month at Rotherhithe as well. Yeah, we had to be just quite creative because with our service users, are mostly young males, so we've just had to be really creative, and we've set up WhatsApp groups, we've set up quizzes every Friday rather than going to football. So we needed to keep that routine of every Friday afternoon. The players have still got something to do. So, and because we have a big group, we have a group of about 30 people coming down. So it's been a case of just keeping people busy and active and keeping people well as well. I think that's the thing that's popping up so much in my job, that there's going to be more people struggling with mental health issues.
And Gary, just to finish for us, how much should you stress the importance of speaking out, relying on family and friends to discuss different issues that you have in life in order to sort of be open about mental health, not afraid to share different problems that you may have?
Yeah, I think the great thing for me is that there's so much awareness now of it, and I'm sure, you know, there's a long way to go in terms of helping people that are suffering and helping them to understand how you know, they can perhaps deal with some of the situations that they're in, particularly in this current time. So I think that the challenge for me is it's no longer seen as you know, I know it's a very lazy assumption, but years ago it was just seen as a weakness. It was seen as something that you didn't come out and talk about. And I think the beauty is, you know, even listening now to everyone else's individual stories and how they've coped with their own situations, it's quite inspiring to see so many people doing such good work and facing it with a real positivity and a real flexibility as well, because everyone's having to think on their feet in situations they're not normally in, you know, which in essence for me is what it's about. You know, if you're an educator you know, you got faced with these scenarios, and how can you inspire people still that are in difficult situations and help people less fortunate than yourself or less prepared than yourself. So I think it's a massively important cause, and hopefully by drawing as much attention to it as we can, and to hopefully gain as much funding as we can help people that are perhaps a little bit less fortunate than ourselves at times to be able to cope with difficult scenarios that they're in. So like I said, I think everyone's story today has been a real inspiration, and it's interesting how many different stories, and shows the importance of everyone's unique, and everyone has their own story to tell. So yeah, I think it's really, really important.